Good day, everyone. Welcome to Apex Hours. Today's session is on OmniStudio best practices within the OmniStudio series. Quick look at Safe Harbor statement. Please make all your purchasing decisions on the product which is generally available, not on the roadmap items. A quick introduction about myself. Hi, I'm Madhava Prakash. I'm the Director of Transformation Architecture within Salesforce. I live in Bangalore. My key focus areas are Salesforce core platform, OmniStudio platform, enterprise product catalog, and CPQ. I specialize in card-based APIs, digital commerce APIs, pricing procedures, enterprise sales management, performance tuning of SFI, DevOps, and Apex. A quick look at agenda. We would be doing a recap of OmniStudio platform architecture. We would be seeing the best practices to be followed for building data raptors, integration procedures, OmniScripts, and flex cards. At the end of the slide, there are links which you could use for your further references. And then we will do a quick demo of a few things what we have covered in the session today. OmniStudio or industry interaction platform. This is the crux of the Salesforce industries. These interaction platform elements stack up on the Sales Cloud and Service Cloud and then provides the necessary levers for industry applications or even for declarative programming, be it OmniScripts, flex cards, data raptors, integration procedures, or industry DX are extremely good alternatives for Apex and custom building. Let's have a quick look at data raptors best practices. Data raptors are the heart of the industry platform or the industry interaction layer, be it cards, whips, OmniScripts, everything depend upon data raptors. If the data raptors do not perform, neither will the cards or OmniScript, and eventually the the user interaction would not be great or the user experience would not be great. Key issues what we have seen at customer projects. Teams are trying to create Uber data raptors with loaded objects. Teams are adding objects without considering that it can be accomplished by using relationship queries. What we recommend, create targeted data raptors to get the data only what is required for that particular operations. If we need 2 or 3 data raptors to complete a particular operation, try to bundle it within an integration procedure. Use relationship queries wherever it is possible to pull the data from related objects. Try keeping the number of objects to 3 or less within a single data raptor. Ensure all the filters and sorts which are used within a data raptors are indexed or at least supports indexing. There's a good alternative for traditional data raptors called data raptor turbo extract. This is a very nice feature to be considered while we are building data raptors. If at all we have a need to just pull data from a single object or that object and the related fields from the related objects, consider using turbo extract. Bear in mind, this turbo extract doesn't support formulas or complex output mappings, but then these are simpler to configure, extremely good for performance. Let's have a look at integration procedures, best practices. Integration procedures and the data can be cached. Wherever possible, try to cache them. The way we would cache them is just allocating some metadata cache and then the response cache space within the partitions, and also checking some checkboxes which we would see later in the demo. Try to use integration procedures for data calls wherever you're trying to get the data from objects or updating the data or whatever you're doing with the data within the platform. Try to use integration procedure rather than Apex. Send only the necessary data. Don't send a bulk of data or a bunch of data and then try to perform the operation, it would slow down the performance. Use response action to return only the necessary data. Instead of returning the full data JSON from the integration procedures or the steps, try to use the data, try to minimize the data what is required for the operation. Use data raptor turbo extract wherever possible. Use chain on steps only when it is absolutely necessary. It is a very nice feature to give some additional transaction time for a particular step. Say, for example, if we anticipate a particular operation might breach the platform transaction limits, when you check on chain on step, whenever it is about to breach, it will spin up a new transaction and continue the transaction. It's a very cool hack, but then use it rationally. Check the necessary indices are there within the CPQ objects whenever we are making the CPQ calls, like say get cards or get cart items. When you're using filters, ensure whatever we are filtering on is indexed or at least supports indexing. Switch off pricing within the CPQ API calls within the IPs when you are not using it. When you don't explicitly switch off, it would still run pricing. Limit wherever possible the pricing calls. Use remote actions only when they are necessary. Try to use caching features wherever possible. Use integration procedures for SOAP and REST calls as an alternative for Apex. We can even expose integration procedures as RESTful resources for other applications to make calls. Whenever we are exposing it, use named credentials, or whenever we are making a call out, use named credentials. For the applications which are running post summer 19, Salesforce Industries do provide security aspects and then some secure cache data access, which we would see in the following slides. Avoid using unnecessary set values. It's a common developer practice to keep using set values for debugging after every operations or even for sending or altering some data. If possible, try to avoid set values. It eats up memory. Define and apply a common naming convention. This is true for the entire platform, not just for integration procedure. The ones which we generally see customers using are lower camel case naming convention, having every operation with a specific name so that they can easily identify what is happening. Come up with a naming convention and then try to use it, including the type and subtype. Use conditional blocks to group similar actions. Instead of having each action having the same condition, try to use a conditional block. Group the actions and then have the conditions on the block. This enhances the performance. We will see all of these things in the demo after towards the end of the session. Let's see how we can cache integration procedures and data raptors. Caching is a very important aspect. This would save us time by reducing the number of trips to the server. We can cache both the definition of the data raptor and then the integration procedure and then the output. There are two types of OmniStudio packages available. The OmniStudio package itself, which can be installed standalone, and the one which comes loaded, preloaded with Velocity. Whenever you are using a standalone OmniStudio package, the integration procedures and data raptors will use the scale cache. But then when we are using the one which is bundled within OmniStudio, within the Velocity, it would use the platform cache. You can define what kind of cache to use for the data within the integration procedure in the procedure step. And also, you can tell like how much time it needs to stay within the cache. Security aspect. Security is a very important aspect. We can control who has access to what data raptors and what integration procedures in a very secure way. for customers. You can start defining your sharing rules and then start associating start associating who would have access to the data raptors, who would have access to integration procedures. Any kind of customization and complexity is possible, but then choose the ones which are best for your implementation. If you're defining data raptors and then for one set of users, basically for some functionality, and there is only one set of users who needs access to that functionality, then try defining such kind of rules. But then if there is a functionality which is common for almost all the business users, you could generally avoid it, and then everybody would have access to these things. Apart from the security aspect about who has access to which data raptors, there's another thing which we need to bear in mind. The data which we cache would be easily accessible to everyone if we are not defining certain or if we are not defining certain security measures. Customers who have configured data raptors and VIPs to be controlled by OWD, by default, the cache data in the platform cache is not secure. If we have to add security for this, we will have to add this setting within the CPQ configuration called check cache metadata record security. This kind of performs a record level check against the cache data. There might be small small performance implications due to these security settings. Bear in mind that what has to win, like say if it is more important for us to keep something secure or if the performance is important and then use this. But generally we define security things for most of the customers. Also, we can control field level security for data raptors. Generally, when we are loading, we ensure we check the field if the user profile has access to that particular field when we are writing the records. We don't do it for extracts, but then if at all there is a need for us to do it for extract, please ensure that this particular setting, check field security, is enabled on the data raptors so that we would start checking whether the particular user has access to a field and then performing the data operation. All of these things we'll see in a demo as well. Let's look at the OmniScript's best practices. The OmniScript as such would run on server and then the client as well. There is some part of the processing which happens on the server. There is some part of the processing which happens on the client. On the server side, ensure we trim the JSON request. Don't send the entire load from the client to the server so that we minimize the data transaction between the client and the server. Use integration procedures to reduce the round trips. Within an OmniScript, we can have like say 4 data raptors, but then each of these data raptor would go, come back, as in there are multiple round trips happening to the server. This can be minimized by using an integration procedure wherein we send certain input and then all the DRs are loaded within the integration procedure. A common use case which we see is an extract, transform, and update. All the 3 data raptors can be individually used within an OmniScript, but then when we use it individually within an OmniScript, we are increasing the server trips, transaction times, and everything. But then when we wrap it within an integration procedure, we do one trip and then the transaction time is used only once. Wherever possible, call asynchronous, make the calls in asynchronously so that we don't have to wait for the response to come back for we going to the next step, which would have a good user experience. Distribute the actions across the OmniScripts so that we make small round trips rather than having everything up- added up to the last and then where we are making where we are making a call out. Use caching features as we discussed in the previous slides for data raptors and IPs so that the round trips are reduced. Use action blocks wherever possible. Avoid long running transactions wherever possible so that we don't breach the platform limits. Avoid using chain on steps on set value elements. On the client side, try to reduce the conditional views, merge fields, formulas wherever possible. Trim the JSON responses. Don't send everything to the client uh, side elements. Trim the responses. Make sure the Omni out and then the JSON definitions are loaded within the content management systems. Remove the spaces from all the UI element names. Uh, if there are spaces, we have seen JavaScripts having issues at times. Reduce the number of OmniScript elements. Run the logic on the server wherever possible instead of processing it on the client side via the JavaScript. Try to run the logic on the server side. Use tracking flag diligently. Overuse of it might impact the performance. Let's have a quick look at the best practices while we are using flex cards. OmniStudio automatically generates LWC whenever you activate a flex card. This is true for the OmniScript as well, which are using LWCs. Therefore, there are certain limits with this auto-generated components. If there is a maximum slice limit of within a component of 131072 characters. If our generated LWC components are exceeding this, we would have failures. It would throw up an error. So it's recommended to have a nested hierarchy of cards, wherein you would start with a parent card, and then you would have a minimal logic there. If at all there is some click that has to be done, or if at all we will have to show another feature, we would use another card, nest it. We call it as a child card, and then we pass the values from the parent to the child card, and we have the logic there. Thereby, we would have a nested hierarchy, but then we would have overcome the size limitations what we have within the platform as such for generated LWC components. So always bear in mind that create simpler, smaller cards, and wherever it is possible or wherever it is required, nest it rather than having a monolith card with all the logic. Custom LWCs increase the size of the auto-generated HTML, and then it might impact the performance or breach the platform limit. So minimize it. Don't keep on adding a lot of custom LWCs within the cards. Make sure your event listeners are unique, and then so that it functions efficiently. For example, if the event listener is listening to two different sources, you might have uh, issues where one user's action might be impacting another one if they are not unique. So try to concatenate with a record ID so that each record would be working with its own event listener rather than using a common one and then not having enough checks and balances to handle the uniqueness. All the auto-generated LWC starts with C-CF and then it would continue. So keep an eye on how many times you are reactivating. So each of them would have generated a component within our LWC. Never ever modify the auto-generated LWCs. It would impact the general functioning of an application, wherein you might have to alter, if at all you alter the auto-generated LWCs, you might have to reactivate it, else the card and then the auto-generated LWCs are not in sync. Avoid it. Never do this. The resources for best practices are listed here. There are all of these have been documented in the Velocity partner community for data raptors, integration procedures, OmniScripts, and security. They are there in detail. What I've tried to cover are the important ones or the key ones which we keep seeing issues with everywhere. And then these are links to our enable sessions or enablement certifications. There are two kinds of certificates for OmniStudio. One is a developer and the other one is a consultant. Try to leverage this. There's also an industry CPQ developer, which is there on WebSSR now. There's industry order management and then insurance and other certifications which you could go for. Let's look at the demo about what we discussed till now. Let's have a quick look at the data raptors, which we were looking at. Here, what the developer is trying to build is a relationship from a quote. They have tried to retrieve quote line items, and then from the quote line items, they have tried to retrieve the product too. See, if I just execute this, it is taking some quote name. Based on the quote name, it got all the offers which are under that particular quote name. What we could have done is, I could have used relationships here. For example, I could have always told that and quote.name is equal to quote name, where I successfully got rid of a query for this particular object, quote object, and then I was able to use a relationship field here, quote.name, from the quote line item itself for doing the query. So now when I run this, I would still get a response, right? Now, what we will do is I will remove this. I will remove this as well. This object itself, I don't need it. So I successfully removed a filter and an object itself. I should still be able to get the same response. So I was able to get rid of one of the queries by using the relationship fields. Relationship fields are not just limited or just not limited to the object definitions here. I could also use relationships for the output. For example, here what we are doing is we are trying to get the product for this particular quote line item. Here when I go, I could always change this as well. Instead of doing product, I can always sell QLI colon to dot name. I've used a relationship field here, and then I can get rid of this second object also. When I see the output now, boom, I'm still able to get the output, but then without using uh, multiple objects. So I can successfully use relationship fields here. Like what I've done here is I have used a relationship at the object level. Even at the output level, I have tried to use a relationship field rather than querying. So we saved two objects, nested query here with two objects, and then we did what we were doing with three objects into one object. Consider using such tricks. There might be certain cases where you would not be able to do this. For example, if I wanted to just get the data from the quote as well as quote line item. Now, if I do this kind of a trick, if the quote line items are not there, I will not be able to get the parent. So this would become an incorrect configuration. So use this diligently. At places, you cannot avoid querying multiple objects, but then at many places, we know that we can avoid querying multiple objects using this relationship queries. This is a very nice trick to increase the performance of the data raptor. Another thing which we discussed with the data raptor is the turbo data raptor. Turbo data raptor is an extremely cool thing to do. What here I have tried to show is just created a turbo data raptor based on account wherein I'm passing an account name or something. I would not get as many options as I have here. Like say there is no formulas. I cannot define the output in the structure I want, but still I would be able to select all the fields. Apart from selecting these fields, I can also add relationship fields. For example, I want to get the owner. say I can add this owner name, or I've already used owner name. Let's say anything else. Yeah, account owner profile. Okay, we'll try to get the profile name here. So I could use such relationship fields to build uh, a complex structure, but then still I'm using a turbo extract so that this runs pretty fast when compared to the traditional data raptors. Consider using data raptors wherever possible, just that I will not be able to construct the output the way I want. It is always defined by the platform, and then I cannot use any um, formulas and other features. So let's quickly do a preview of this. Maybe I'll just remove few things. One of them does not have something. That's fine. Let's quickly build another one. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is building the response like this. So I was trying to use a related object here, account owner, and then under that related object, I was trying to use another one, account owner profile, and then I wanted to add a profile name, and let's see a response for this. So we are getting owner, and then under the owner we are getting a profile, and then some value for this as system administrator, whatever. So you could build complex structures even with turbo data raptors for the particular field and then its related hierarchy. We'll also quickly look at a few other things. This was one of the things which I was telling, checking the field level security. If at all I have to check the field level security, I can select the cache where I have to store my response into for how many minutes. If it is not changing much, I can always rely on the cache rather than recomputing this. These are possibilities. Minimize the number of formulas if we don't have to. Minimize using custom apex in the formulas. The entire objective of data raptor is to make it declarative. Don't add formulas with custom apex and then try to achieve some functionality. These are the ones which I wanted to cover with data raptors. Let's have a quick look at integration procedure once. Here what I have done is I've tried to create an integration procedure which is making the call to the data raptors which we have defined. There was one which was making a call to the quote. This was the one which I was working with for the quote line item, demo relationship dr. Demo relationship dr. This is the turbo raptor which we were just now creating. And then I've tried to use a card-based API here, and then we are preparing a response and then sending the response. Now, while we have configured this, if you notice, I've used some sort of a naming convention here, wherein it clearly specifies I am doing a data raptor action like underscore DRA. If I'm doing a turbo data extract, I'm using DTA turbo action. For remote action, I'm using RA. For set values, I'm using RV. Try to come up with some naming convention like this and then start using. And also, it's good to have your type and subtype defined. Don't have a generic type and subtype for everything. Have a type and subtype for for some kind of functionality what we are working on. Like say, if we are working on cart, I would start with cart and then subtype as get cart items, get cards, post cart items, put cart items would be our subtypes. Or if I am working with account, I could say account is my type, get account details, set account details, reset account, whatever can be the subtype. Also, if you slightly come down here, we could always define the space or the place where we are trying to cache this response. We can cache this response. We can also say define the definition cache so that the metadata itself will not be disable the definition cache so that the metadata itself will not be cached and it will always be fetched from the server. Usually we would avoid doing this. We want the metadata definition to be cached. Now we'll also see how we would set up the caching and then come up here to look at this integration procedure. I'm using velocity with OmniStudio included here. So I will just search for platform cache. This is the metadata cache where the definition of the integration procedure would be stored. We have set the allocation to 2, both for the session and the org. This is for the response, where the response itself will be stored in this particular cache. Have some allocations here before we define the cache value. Right now, the only disadvantage is whenever something is cached, and if at all we have to immediately test it, we might have to clear the cache, or in the options map while we are calling the data raptor, we might have to, where is this options map? We might have to set this reset cache is equal to true so that we always get it. This is for testing. Then once it is activated, if the application has to get the new cache, we might have to clear the cache if it is within the cacheable time. Now, we spoke about naming conventions. We spoke about caching. Let's see a few other things. Here, instead of sending the full data JSON, I am sending the required input from the additional input. If I don't set this flag, if I don't set this send only additional input flag, when I run this particular whip, you would start seeing, if I show you the input for that particular step, you are seeing everything as in cart ID, everything which was there in my input is going. Cart ID is there, account name is there, quote name is there, everything is going. But then when I enable this and then send only the required input, if you see the same input request, whatever was required for this particular operation, only quote name was required, only that went. So this is a way to use or trim the input JSON, so the input requests which goes. I've tried to use this everywhere. For example, for the next step also, I was trying to call the Turbo Raptor which we had created. Even there I'm using it. Now let's look at this cart-based API. I am deleting these two things now. When I made a call to the cart-based API without specifying the pricing, let's execute this. You would see the server time was 1.4 milliseconds. We will see the input for the cart-based API. I was sending a cart ID and then it was kind of calling a method called getCart. Then it was giving me the cart response. Whatever was there in that particular cart, it was responding back. Then it was running pricing. When I explicitly pass this price and validate to be false, you see, it got reduced. It was a slight improvement because my cart was simple and then the operation was simple. But still, you would see the benefit on the server and then on the CPQ as well, Apex CPQ as well. Now, how to use set values? I wanted to build a complex structure, the response of all the three things I wanted to kind of uh, build it in a structured way. So I've just defined set values. This set values can be made more complex as well. Here, what I have done is I've just defined a set value and I have just added the responses here. So when I run this particular step, it is just setting up the responses. Whatever response was coming from these three operations, query code, query account, and query cart, are being just set here. Sorry, cart was named as this. Yeah, all right. So we have built this. Maybe if I want to complicate this, I can still complicate it in a bigger way. Like say I have a structure where I want to define a complex structure. Say for example, any kind of an object structure can be defined here. And then this can be also made dynamic based on the responses what we have. So it's a very good feature. As a property, and then let's see the response. Now when I see the set value response, you would see I am getting it. I can also dynamically add the responses from any of these things to here and it would work. So that's the beauty of using set values to get the required outputs. Now let's see the response action. For the response action, currently I am returning the full data JSON where you would see the entire thing, like whatever has happened in this particular output, it is going out. It's cluttered, it is too heavy. We might not need it. There are repeated entries here and other stuff. I can define what needs to go out. Like say, for example, I have prepared a response here and I'm sending only that. If I just remove this return full data JSON and then I have trimmed it. See, it's a lot more smaller. I can even go further smaller. Like say, if I want to send the response of only this node, after I have done everything, I can just say response and then boom, send this particular path and then we should be good with only that response. See, you see the response of only that item. So this is how we trim the response as well instead of sending the entire thing as response. All right. So this is all I had intended to cover in this particular session. For any questions, please reach out to us. We will make our best attempt to respond back to your queries. Happy learning. Thanks a lot.